you've come here to learn how to turn this into this, in that case, you've come to the right place. I'm gonna go through the various steps you have to take to turn the lock into a beam, show you different kinds of axes you can use, and maybe show you one or two tricks as well. And of course, as always, we're gonna use hand tools only. So let's get into it. The very first step is to mark the lock. I start by drawing a vertical line and then a horizontal line, and then I try to fit my square into the lock. I'm going to make a beams 14 by 14 centimeters. I have already drawn my lines. You do this on both ends of the lock, and I have the lock fastened to these strong supports. That way I can be sure that the lock doesn't move and both the squares on both the ends match each other. There's no twist in the wood. Once you have both the ends marked, I take my string marker so it follows one of the corners, and now I stretch the string I go to the other corner, on the other end of the lock. I stretch the string and then just release it. That way you've got a perfect line that follows one of the edges of your square all the way across the lock. If you don't have one of these, which is fine, but they cost like $5, so maybe just go buy them. But if you don't have one, you can just use a piece of string, get it real dirty with wood ash, and then stretch the string all across the lock, the same way I did with the string marker. That's the original way, that's how the old timers would do it, but if you are lazy like me, then just use the string marker. So with the drawing done, it's time for some axe work. The first step you have to take is to score the beam, which means you put notches into the side of the lock every, let's say, like 30 centimeters or 1 feet. And I like to use this axe. It has a very long head with a narrow point, narrow edge. It goes really well into the wood, but it's not crucial. You can use just about any axe you have. I like to get on the top of the lock and make my first cut. As I'm chopping through the wood, I'm using the red line as a marker, and I'm trying to not cut further than the red line. Alright, that's about right. And then you go all the way across the whole lock, putting notches every 30 centimeters or so. And that's the scoring done. There are various ways how to do this. You can use a saw, or you can use a chainsaw if you want to save some time and you don't care about, you are just not so hardcore on using hand tools. It can be done in two people, where two people cut simultaneously, and probably there's a couple of other ways as well. The way I using the axe is really simple. It doesn't require much equipment, but in the end it comes to the personal choice. So we've put the notches on the lock, and the next step is to remove the wood between the notches. I'd like to use the American felling axe for this, but again, it comes to your own taste. As long as it gets the job done, then it's fine. So I start slowly chopping, and as I go through, I use a little bit more force. Again, I'm using the red line as my marker, and I'm not going any further. Actually, I'm leaving like 1 centimeters of extra wood, just to stay safe. Yeah, that's the first notch done. I move to the second one, doing just the same thing, and I go through the whole lock like this. That's the bulk of the material removed, and it leaves the surface really rough, which is not problem just because it doesn't look so good, but if you're gonna use the logs, use the beams for some carpentry, for some joinery, drawing your lines on this will be really complicated, and fitting all the pieces won't work really well. So you proceed to the next step, which is like polishing the surface, and there's a few ways you can go around that. I'm going to show you 3 ways how you can do that, and the first one is going to be using these bearded axes. This bearded axe, I guess they are called bearded axes because if you look at them from the profile, it looks like a beard. Yeah, so that's that. And this axe is a heavily inspired by an axe from the 13th century, and you can actually see the axe, the original, in Prague, in museum, and this is a replica made by my friend. And these axes were used for so-called low work. Low work means you are working close to the ground, having the log placed like I have the log behind me. There's a couple of positives and a couple of negatives about that. The positives are that you can work close to the ground, therefore you don't have to lift the log so high, which is fine if you have a log this small, but if you have really big trees, you just won't be able to lift them very high off the ground, especially if you work alone. The other positive is that these axes are really fast. You go through the log much faster than with the big broad axe. The third positive is that these axes are super multi-purpose. If I had to choose one axe I'm going to use, it's 100% going to be this axe of this type, because it can be used for felling the tree. You can remove the branches, you can then score the log as we did before, you can remove the material between the notches, and then you can use it for polishing as I'm going to do now. there's no axe that can fit all these rolls. Maybe the flying axes can, but this axe fits that roll much better. It does much better job. So, alright, that's the theory, and now let's get into the action. I'm starting on the thinner end of the lock, and I start with a couple of really light swings. Remember, you can always remove more, but once you cut the wood away, you can't put it back. And this time I come all the way to the red line. It leaves the surface of the wood really smooth. If you get really proficient in this, it almost looks like if it was planed. Obviously I'm not in that stage yet, but I'm working on it. And then I just continue going down the log using the same technique. My handle is really long. If you take a look at the historical axes, usually they have their handles much shorter, like this short. It makes the axis easier to work this way, so you don't have this extra handle sticking out. But what I like about these long handles is that I can stand much more straight and use the axe like this, which is going to save you some back pain. But some people prefer working closer to the ground and just grabbing the axe like this, and they don't have any need for this extra handle. I like to go for 2 runs on the wood. The first run I'm doing now is just removing the wood really fast, still leaving some extra wood later. I'm going backwards. Usually it was done like this, going backwards, but you can go forward as well. And the good thing about going backwards is that I have all this wood sticking out, and it really guides the head of the axe really well, so it always strikes in the same place. I'm showing you this in real time, so you can see it doesn't really take that much time as you might think. Whew. Okay, it's not cold anymore. There are still some rough spots and some leftover cuts from cutting the notches before, but yeah, I mean, you could use this beam, but it just won't look so well. And if you're gonna use it for some more sophisticated joinery, well, good luck with that. But it can be used, yeah. I'm going to go through the log one more time, and this time being more precise. I don't have to remove that much material right now because I removed most of the wood in the first run, so the second run is more about just polishing the surface, making it look pretty and making it look precise. The tree I'm using here was dead for some quite time. You can see all the bark has fallen off, which is great because the tree is really light and really easy to transport, but on the other hand it's not so great because it makes the hewing more difficult and the surface is not as good as it could be if I was using a green wood. So if you can, I recommend getting a green wood, fresh cut trees. I'm using the dead trees because we had a lot of these spruces die in the last 2 years, so you can get them real cheap, but if you can, get a fresh wood. It makes your life much easier. It really depends on you how precise you want to go, and you have to consider what are the logs, what are the beams going to be used for. Sometimes you need the beams to be really precise with really sharp edges. Sometimes it just doesn't really matter that much, so you might save some time and leave the surface just a little bit rougher. But in any way, the good idea is now and then check if the beam is straight, that it's really vertical on the surface, so you are not putting any twist into it like this way or maybe this way. Again, you can trust your eyes, but checking it like this, good idea, recommend it. This is how the surface looks after finishing. So yeah, I'm pretty happy how it turned out. This time around I've skipped the phase of making the notches. I won't be able to do it if the log was too thick or there was too much material to remove, but as long as you are not removing too much of the wood, you're removing just this thin stripe, this long wooden noodle, it can be done, and it saves time, a lot of time actually. I had some people ask me about using power tools, and while I have to agree that yeah, using power tools is faster, no doubt about that, but you have to take into consideration that if you're gonna use power tools, it's not just about the work itself, but you have to take care of the power tools. You have to clean them, you have to sharpen them, and sometimes they break. you have to fix them. There's some extra work. I mean, yeah, you have to sharpen the axe, but that's like the matter of minutes. Whilst cleaning the chainsaw takes you a longer time. And if you're gonna use power tools using electricity, then yeah, you need the cables, you need electricity, and if you are working in the middle of nowhere, like I am, that might be a problem. So that's something for a thought. And as you can see me working through this log, it really doesn't take that much time. The conclusion, yeah, power tools are faster, there's just no discussion about that. But still, I think working like this, there's a potential in that, and it's not just for the hardcore fanboys of medieval technology or something, or my mom didn't bought me Minecraft, so I have to do it like this. No, there's a practical application for working like this, and I think it teaches you a lot. You come really closer to the material, and I mean, just give it a try. And when it comes to giving a try, you might say, but hey, I don't have that fancy bearded axe of yours. Well, and that's fine. I'm going to go the second run using the felling axe, and obviously it's not the axe designed for this job, but you can still do it even with the felling axe, and everybody has a felling axe. If you are a homesteader or you live nearby the woods, you have the felling axe, and if you don't, then go get one. The second run, polishing of the surface using an axe that's designed for something entirely else. Let's give it a try and see how it works. So what's the conclusion? Can it be done? Yes, it can. I mean, it actually went surprisingly well. My only issue with using this axe is that I really like to grab the axe when I'm having the beams really close to the head, like this. And the problem with this axe is that it's really thick here, so it's really demanding on your grip, you know. So if I were to use this axe for hewing, I would make the handle thinner. But aside from that, it works. I mean, the surface is not perfect, and it takes you slightly more time than when using the dedicated tool, the bearded axe. But considering that this axe was made for something entirely different, it did a pretty good job. So yeah, thumbs up for the American felling axe. Now it's time to do the third side of the beam, and I'm again going to use my bearded axe. And that's it, almost done. I have 3 sides of the beam finished, and for the last side we are gonna switch to big boy axe, to the broad axe. There is a couple of differences when working with the broad axe compared to the bearded axe, but the beginning stage is the same. I'm going to take the long and narrow axe. I'm going to make the notches, do the rough work, and once I have the rough work and the bulk of the material removed from the beam, I'm going to take it and put it on the sawhorses and then switch to my broad axe. that's the setup for the broad axe work ready. There are a couple of key differences between working with a broad axe and the bearded axe. First, as you can see, I have the beam at about the waist height, which is really good for your back, so you don't have to bend over all the time. But also it comes with the issue that you can't lift these logs alone. I mean, if you have a big ones, you won't be able to lift them alone, so you will need some kind of equipment for that, or you will need a couple of friends. I've removed most of the wood on the ground with the previous axes, and now I'm going to finish the surface with the broad axe. If you're gonna give this a try and you're gonna search for an axe, you are much more likely to find a broad axe than you are likely to find a bearded axe. That's because these axes were produced during the 18th, 19th and even the 20th century, really. So there's a lot of surviving pieces today. This axe was given to me by my grandfather, and it was manufactured during the first Czechoslovakia Republic during the 20s. There's actually a little sign here, hopefully you can see that. It's words J and C, which stands for Jan Červenka, which is a manufacturer of these axes. Well, so that's just an interesting fact. Okay, let's get to work. If you take a look at the broad axe, you can see that the handle is off-center. Little bit, but it is. It is a little bit off-centered. It goes this way. In case you buy just the axe head and you decide to make the handle yourself, remember that you need to make the handle a little bit off-center. That way, when you start cutting, you don't strike your fingers, your finger knuckles, and they stand a little bit of the way. If you stumble upon a nasty knot like this one, which can really ruin your day, what I recommend you to do is use the bottom of your broad axe, start cutting a little bit forward, a little bit further than the knot is. Just release the wood behind the knot and then do the same thing in front of the knot. That way you are not fighting the whole piece, but you are cutting just through the knot. So now with the wood released here and here, we can cut through the knot. Polish the surface a little bit. Yeah, and that's the knot cut. Very clean. Using the broad axe, I'm actually coming forward. I'm not going backwards like I did with the bearded axe. That's because the broad axe has this long nose in front, and the nose is guiding my axe. You might see I have quite a lot of material here, and I'm actually not removing it because, again, these splinters, they help me to guide the edge where it needs to be. If I cut all this, then I'll be juggling my axe all around. Here, the splinters guide your axe right where it needs to be. A question you might have is why they actually decided to switch from the bearded axes to the broad axes. And the reason is that the carpentry and the joinery was getting more and more complicated, and no matter how skilled you are, the surface of the bearded axe is always going to be slightly uneven, slightly more rough compared to bearded axe. And as the joinery and the carpentry was getting more and more complicated, they required more and more precise beams, and the bearded axe just wasn't good enough in producing those beams. And that's where the broad axes came. So yeah, that's that. That's the beam finished. I hope you've learned something. If you want to give this a try, your best bet is to search eBay for a broad axe. Usually you can find some of the broad axes there, not that expensive. If you want to use the bearded axe, which I personally prefer, your situation is slightly more complicated, because if you find any bearded axe, it will be in a museum and it won't be for sale. So if you want a bearded axe, you have to search for a blacksmith and have your bearded axe made, custom made. If you don't have neither broad axe, neither a bearded axe, you can just use your felling axe. As you have seen, it can be done and it's a lot of fun. Okay, this is probably the last hewing video for some time, because I'm almost finished. This is one of the last beams I'm going to make for my roof. I have just 3 or 4 beams left, really. If you have any questions, ask down below in the comments. I hope you liked the video, and see you soon, guys.